So, here I was, sitting in my new apartment, observing the current events, and, like many of you, needed something to do that didn't make me want to game end myself. So, I replayed Assassin's Creed 2. Okay, so for some history, I played and loved AC2 like any real boy back when it came out in 2009-ish, and I really liked it. Going forward, it remained in my memory as the best Assassin's Creed game, may be rivaled by Black Flag, which, so I hear, is not an unpopular opinion. However, when last I played it, I really didn't have much of a functioning brain, considering I was younger than 18. So, why don't you join me as I chat about my re-experience of maybe one of the most important video games ever made? Let's start with some key facts. Fact number 1. The first Assassin's Creed was not very good. I don't say this to slam it or to be mean, it just genuinely does not hold up anymore. It's riddled with bugs, features the blandest unseasoned chicken breast protagonist imaginable, and has exactly 3 types of missions. Fact number 2. The first Assassin's Creed rocked. What at first glance seemed like a medieval hack-and-slash gorefest turned out to be an intensely creative story set not in the Middle Ages, but in neo-capitalist hellscapes where a barista is kidnapped by a slightly less evil Disney in order to revisit the lives of his ancestors. This setup is bonkers, and it leads into some even more bonkers plot points about the Apple of Eden and biblical conspiracies, and also your buttons control a limb each. Welcome to the future, baby. And fact number 3. Assassin's Creed 2 is better in every single way. Yes, you have undoubtedly heard it countless times, but when talking about Assassin's Creed 2, it is impossible not to mention how big of an upgrade it was and still is over the first game. More tools, more missions, more variety, more everything. But maybe the biggest upgrade remains the setting. While the Crusades certainly had their charm, which is a phrase no one should ever say, the life and detail given to Renaissance Italy is of a quality that I don't think has ever been replicated anywhere. This was before Ubisoft settled into their trademark world-building style, and so it's a lot more focused on historical pseudo-accuracy and the general vibe. The fact that I, a half-Italian, can go to Venice and find the exact palace built by my ancestor in the game, and that I can hear the town herald scream about that same ancestor as well, is, scientifically speaking, the coolest shit ever made. But even beyond personal anecdotes, the general level of quality of the world is absolutely staggering. Of course, translating a real location into a video game world will always result in realistic architecture and layout, but it is nonetheless incredible how well these places work as video game locations while being incredibly faithful. Shortly after I first finished AC2, I asked my dad to take me on a trip across Italy. I went to San Gimignano, I saw Monteriggioni, I visited Venezia, and you know what I felt? Familiarity. I visited these distant places, these ancestral lands of my family for the first time, and yet I felt like I had been there before. Because I had in a video game. And that's a feeling that I don't think I'll ever have again. Speaking of things that are forever gone, boy, remember when Assassin's Creed was about Ezio? 'Cause I sure do. If there's one thing almost any Assassin's Creed fan will tell you, it's that everything was better with Ezio Auditore da Firenze. And they'd be right. Following any character from birth to ascendance is a powerful narrative in of itself, and in Ezio's case, it is empowered by just how likable he is. Witty, snarky, but kind-hearted and well-meaningly dutiful, this Casanova is so charismatic that you almost forget what a horrible murderer he is. Ma it's okay, it's my man Ezio, è il mio amico, che vuoi che faccio, Che pensi, Pensi che voglio io blah 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 blah. I haven't spoken Italian in a while. Anyway, his coming-of-age story ends up making him incredibly endearing, which is good because, oh boy, the story. For some reason, me and every person on the planet remembers AC2's story as pretty good. So imagine my shock when my replay yielded for me the realization that the story is actually pretty bad. Don't get me wrong, Ezio and his emotional scenes are great, but the actual plot is kind of nonsense. Let alone the fact that it's basically an endless chain of Rodrigo wanting to take over some city or another and Ezio stopping him. The real offense is the amount of really important info that the game never tells you. For example, the crime that Giovanni Auditore was investigating and that gets blamed on him and that has him and Ezio's brothers executed, the inciting incident of the story, was the murder of the Duke of Milano. This is mentioned a single time in a missable dialogue. Or how about Rodrigo Borgia, the main villain, not only becomes Pope off-screen, but we also don't even get to see Ezio's reaction to it. We are placidly told that fact in a loading screen. This problem plagues the entire plot. 10 years will go by and the player might hear snippets of the really important stuff that happened there if they're lucky. For a game all about time shenanigans, it sure has no clue on how to communicate time. There is a cool story here, but it's held back by how badly it is told, with so much stuff just not being shown or not being said. Ezio arrives in Monteriggioni a few hours in, and his uncle Mario promised him to explain the ways of the assassins. Not only is the explanation only about 2 phrases long, but it happens in the middle of gameplay, so no way for the player to actually see or feel Ezio's reaction. And then, the supposedly month-long training is condensed into not even a minute of fighting a little bit. Like what? And then, there are the broken memories. In the second half of the game, there is a 10-year time skip within which the player is tasked with finding the remaining codex pages. However, there are things that happen in this time period, things that are actually important to the plot, but the memories pertaining to them are broken in the base game. Yes, in the base game. Because these pieces of the game were sold as DLC. Like, come on, man. It's for these reasons that I would really recommend reading Oliver Bowden's novelizations of the games. The first book, Assassin's Creed Renaissance, covers AC2 and does a really good job of making sense of this clusterfuck storyline. But beyond the storyline, the gameplay itself is not quite like I remember. Free running and parkour is fantastic, and while the occasional oopsie does happen, it's not enough to ruin my experience. And I like the combat way more this time around because counter-based combat isn't as rare now as it used to be in the late noughties. But man, some of the stuff is weird. So you can hide among crowds, but not all of them. Some just don't count. The game tells you 3 people or more creates cover, but even that is not true. Then there are these bars that will try to rip you up, which you'd think would be an incentive for you to learn patience and social behavior, to blend in. Nope, the only way to get rid of them is punching them, which makes you a criminal, or throwing cash at them, which attracts attention. Similarly, you can do various things to reduce your crime level, for example remove posters. This should make your life easier, but if literally any guard sees you, it initiates a fight which causes your crime level to increase again if you as much as bump into the people trying to stab you. Also, on behalf of my entire brand, fuck any mission where you have to go undetected. If a dying guard recognizes you a split second before your blade hits them, it's game over. They can and will detect you inside the killing animation. It's complete bullshit. But I do realize we are approaching the end of the video, so I would like to cap off with one final point. The ending of Assassin's Creed 2 is complete insanity. So, you collect all the pages of the Magic MacGuffin, and it tells you that God lives under the Vatican. You realize that your arch-enemy has been plotting to become the Pope for his entire life, so he can take the power of God. You go to Rome, which is just a giant corridor of goons. You reach the Pope, stab him, and he is fine. He gets up, mind flays some priests, you clone yourself, and you fight. The Pope is immune to bullets? After you beat him, he stabs you anyway and leaves you for dead. You wake up, your wounds are never mentioned again by the way, and follow him into the Apple Store. Here, you throw down your blade and then throw hands with the Pope as he talks about God. And then you let him live because suddenly you're too good for killing. And then you enter the tomb, and the ghost lady speaks of the future and of a solar flare that eliminated the progenitor race of superior humans, and that it will happen again, all while showing symbols of the evil Disney Corporation. And all the while, she stares directly into the camera, speaking to you, not Ezio. And finally, she drops Desmond's name directly and vanishes, and the game ends with...
What the fuck?
Thank you all for watching as always, and of course, a big thank you to our patrons, including Archagent Everlasting, Daniel Garcia, Emerald, Fiction Ape, Ignis, Paradja, Sini, Victor Perez, Cesar Londono, Trader, and Mr. Meander. Thank you again for all your support, and I love all of you. See you around. Bye bye.